Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Storytime with Sue. Today, we're going to be learning all about bees. Bees are a very important part of life on the farm. We are lucky at the farm to have a friend who's an apiarist, which means beekeeper, and he keeps his bees at the farm. His honeybees are doing so well that he recently increased the number of hives that he has at the farm from 2 to 4. So the beehives are located behind the farm stand, and Sean, the beekeeper, comes by every once in a while, checks on them, gets some honey from their hives, and makes sure that they're doing well. The bees were very quiet over the winter, and now they're busy again. They're buzzing all around. You can usually hear them before you even see them. They mostly stay close to the hives, but sometimes you see them out flying around. So today we're going to learn about different kinds of bees. First, we're going to talk about bees in general, and then we're going to focus on honeybees, which are the kinds of bees that Sean keeps at the farm. Introduce you to my friend. This is a musical bee. If you shake him, he makes all kinds of noise. Those crinkly wings. No stinger, though. He's a lot of fun. He's a pointy little proboscis. The first book we're going to talk about is Questions and Answers About Bees. This is a great book full of all kinds of interesting information. It's written by Betty Rijo and illustrated by Robert Parker. So I'm not going to read you the whole book because there's quite a good bit of information in here. But if you're interested, you can probably get it on your own. It was printed by Scholastic Book Services. I'm going to read you a few sections that I think are really interesting introductions to bees. So let's take a look. Let's get lined up. There we go. What are bees? Bees are hairy insects with wings. Bees, wasps, and ants are all related. Wasps look something like bees, but wasps are meat eaters. Bees are flower eaters. Do all bees look alike? No, there are thousands and thousands of different kinds of bees. Most of them are black, sometimes with yellow marks. Some are shiny blue, or green, or purple, or even red. Many have white hairs that make them look gray. Some bees are thin. Some are chunky. Some are as tiny as the O on this page. Do you see how tiny that is compared to my fingernail? Some are giant bees about as long as your thumb. Most are an in-between size. Do bees live with other bees? Most bees live alone all their lives. A bee that lives alone is called a solitary bee. Some bees begin their lives as solitary bees. Later, they live with other bees. Usually, they're grown children. Bees that live with other bees are called social bees. They belong to a colony. A colony may have just 2 or 3 or 4 bees. Some colonies have many more. There are some very social bees that belong to colonies with thousands of bees. The place where bees live is called a nest. Here's a kind of a solitary bee called a carpenter bee. Here's a kind of a social bee called a honeybee. Honeybees live together in a colony. Where do you find bees? Wherever flowers bloom, there are usually bees. It may be a meadow, a garden, a city park, a windowsill, a farm, an orchard, a mountain, or a jungle. On warm, sunny days, bees can be seen anywhere if flowers are there. What do bees eat? There are two parts of a flower that bees need for food. One is nectar, the sweet juice of a flower. Bees suck nectar with a tube-like tongue that is part of their proboscis. The other flower food that bees eat is pollen. A bee usually takes the tiny yellow grains of pollen from flowers with the hairs on its front legs. Then it may put the pollen in its mouth. And this doesn't have pictures, but I'll read it to you. Does each bee find its own food? Each solitary bee finds its own food. A solitary bee that is going to be a mother brings food back to the nest for the babies she will have. In a colony of honeybees, the older bees usually hunt for food. They bring it back for other bees in the nest. They also have a way to let the bees in the nest know where to get the food themselves. And the interesting thing about that is the way that bees tell other bees where to find food is by doing a little dance. And even though it's dark in the nest and the other bees can't see the bee giving the message, they can feel the movements and sense which way the bee is going. So bee has a certain kind of dance if the food is nearby, and has a different kind of dance if the food is farther away. And the dance varies based on the pattern. Sometimes it dances in a circle, sometimes it dances in a figure 8. And that explains to the other bees where to go to get food. It's pretty smart. Let's have a few bee jokes. This one is my favorite. How does a bee comb his hair? And if you have guesses, you can put them in the chat box right over here. If you're subscribing to our channel, type in what you think the answer might be, and I'll see it and I'll read it. How does a bee comb his hair? Probably not with his fingers. Probably not with a brush. What does he use? A honeycomb. Ha ha ha. Makes his hair sticky too, I bet. Another joke. What did the bee like best about getting married? Two bees fell in love. They got married. And what was the bee's favorite part of the marriage? The honeymoon. Let's do one more joke. Who is a bee's favorite singer? So this joke actually has two answers, and I'll give you both of them. Who is a bee's favorite singer? If you're an older bee like me, you might know about Sting, who was a singer that was very popular a few decades ago. And if you're a younger bee, also like me, you might know about Beyonce. She has bee in her name. So let's move on and talk about a certain type of aspect of bees. Talk some more about the food that bees eat and why bees are so important. You may have seen in the news that the population of bees in the world is going down, and that's not good. So let me tell you why. Bees fly from flower to flower to get food. If nectar is deep inside a flower, the bee with the long tongue can get it. The kinds of bees that have short tongues go to flowers where nectar is easier to reach. There are orchid bees, sunflower bees, cactus bees, and other kinds of bees with flower names. These bees are named for the flower they usually go to for food. Most bees go to the same kind of flower for a while. It may be just for a day or for a few days. Then a bee will change to another flower. Flowers are the parts of a plant where seeds form. A flower must get pollen from another flower of the same kind to form seeds. It is from a seed that a new plant grows. Some flowers get pollen because the wind carries the pollen over from another flower. Some flowers get pollen from other insects that come for food. The creature that probably does the best job of bringing pollen from one flower to another is the bee. You see why bees are so important? A lot of pollen that falls on a bee's hairy body gets left on other flowers the bee visits. Now new seeds can form, new plants can grow. If there were no bees, we would not have many beautiful flowers. We would not have many plants and trees. We would not have many fruits and vegetables that grow from seeds. Bees don't care about our having beautiful flowers and food to eat. They just happen to spread pollen because they are looking for food for themselves. So there, now you can see more about why bees are so important. I want to show you a close-up picture of a bee that will give you a better idea of how they move the pollen around. This is a very close-up picture of a bumblebee. Do you see how hairy it is? All the little hairs. And this is a lot of pollen that the bee is carrying on its legs in these little areas called pollen baskets. They also have hooks on the ends of their legs, on their feet, that help them hook onto the flowers. They have bendable antennae, which help them sense things around them. Here's the bee's wings, which it folds back when it's not flying. And as I said before, look at all this fuzzy hair. It helps to trap warm air next to the bee's body. So that's very interesting. I like that close-up picture of the bee. This is from a really good book series called Look Closer, Meadow. This book's about a meadow, and it's full of pictures of all kinds of things you might find in a meadow, including some of the flowers that bees like to eat. Next, I'm going to read you a really nice story about honeybees. Before I do, I'm going to show you some different kinds of honey that I have in my house. I got this honey from the Newton Farmers Market this summer. There was someone there selling this angry honey. I don't think this bee looks very angry. And I really like this honey because it has cinnamon and vanilla infused in it. So it has the flavor of cinnamon and vanilla and honey. Here's another type of honey we have at our house. You've probably seen this one in the grocery store because it comes in this little bear shape because bears like to eat honey. So often you find honey in a bear-shaped container. This one's almost empty. And the reason I like this container, can you guess? It's my name, Sue. Sue Bee Honey. My last name starts with a B. So I like to think of myself as Sue Bee sometimes. You might hear my dog singing a song in the background. She wants to be part of Storytime too. The next book we're going to read is called In the Trees, Honeybees, and it's by Lori Mortensen with illustrations by Chris Arbo. And I like this book because it's nonfiction. It tells you the true story about bees. In the trees, honeybees. Morning light, warm and bright. In the trees, honeybees. Ooh. Blossoms out, dancing scout. Many wild honeybees live in hollow tree trunks. When sun warms the air, honeybees search for flowers in bloom. After a scout bee finds flowers rich with nectar and pollen, it returns to the hive and tells the others where to find them by doing a waggle dance. You can see he came from his nest, he found the flowers, and then he went back to tell the other bees. Sisters fly through the sky. Soon thousands of honeybees leave the hive to find the blossoms. These honeybees are called worker bees. They are all sisters. It's a lot of sisters. Nectar sweet, pollen treat. Worker bees collect nectar and pollen to feed the colony. As they fly from blossom to blossom, the bees drink the sweet nectar and collect powdery pollen on their legs, like the pictures we just saw. Wow, look how beautiful their home is. Harvest home, honeycomb. When the bees are loaded with nectar and pollen, they fly back to the hive. There, other worker bees receive the nectar and pollen and store them in wax honeycomb cells. Isn't that amazing? They make these hexagons, adjoining hexagons. Feed and clean, precious queen. So there's one queen in the colony. An average colony has 15,000 to 50,000 worker bees. But there is only one queen. Worker bees take care of her so she can lay the eggs that will become new members of the colony. Do you see them going in and out? There's one halfway in the honeycomb. Lots of food, hungry brood. See the proboscis? It's like a straw. 3 days after the queen lays an egg, it hatches into a hungry larva. Nurse bees feed it a rich supply of food from glands in their heads. During its larva stage, nurse bees will feed it more than 100,000 times. That's a lot of feedings. A lot of work these bees do. Water drips. Sip, sip, sip. Too much heat. Thousands beat. Honeybees collect water too. When temperatures climb, thousands of bees fan their wings. The evaporating water cools the hive. Uh-oh, here comes a bear. Bear attack! Uh-oh. Sting and smack. Guard bees protect the colony. When an intruder tries to get in, the guard bees drive it away and sting. Wasps, moths, skunks, and bears are just a few of their enemies. Well, that bear changed his mind. Shape the wax, seal the cracks. Honeybees build their combs out of wax. Young worker bees secrete wax flakes from special glands under their bodies. They use their mouths and their front legs to shape the soft wax into honeycomb. Honeybees also gather sticky sap from trees. They use it to coat the inside of the hollow tree and seal holes and cracks. It is called bee glue or propolis. That is interesting. It's like caulk. Gather more, winter store. To prepare for the cold months of winter, honeybees make as much honey as they can during spring and summer. A colony will need about 30 to 60 pounds of honey to survive the winter when the blossoms are gone. Coming over here to the cucumber plant. Fading light, homing flight. As the sun sets, the air cools and the blossoms close. Workers fly back to their hive for food, warmth, and shelter with the rest of the colony. Chilly night, cluster tight. To stay warm during chilly nights, honeybees cluster together and buzz until morning light, warm and bright. In the trees, honeybees. Bzzz. There they go again. And in the back of this book, there's a whole section about honeybees. More information about what they do how they grow, how busy they are. And right here in this picture, you can see the beekeeper. And he has on a protective suit. He wears a hat with a net on it and a full body suit to protect himself. When I see the beekeeper at Newton Community Farm, he also wears gloves and he tucks his pants into his socks so that no bees can get inside his suit and sting him. That was a very nice book, In the Trees, Honeybees, by Lori Mortensen and illustrated by Chris Arbo. I hope that you enjoyed it. I have a few more jokes to tell you about bees. Bees are a really easy subject to make jokes about because bee can be used as a word in many different ways. And in fact, our assistant farmer is named Bee. They work really hard on the farm, planting all the seedlings, putting them out in the field, harvesting the crops. So Farmer Greg and Assistant Farmer Bee, which I think is the perfect name for someone who works on a farm. Our next joke is, why did the bee go to the barber? And if you have an idea of what the answer is, you can put it in the chat box. Why did the bee go to the barber? We probably all need a trip to the barber right about now. The answer is, there's an answer that I found and there's an answer that my husband came up with. So the answer that I found to that was, why did the bee go to the barber? To get a buzz cut. And the other answer that my husband thought of is to get a comb over, which is when you comb your hair all over to one side. So both of those are pretty funny. Here's another one. What do you call a bee born in May? And right now, there really are little bees being born. A friend of mine has some bees here in Newton, and she just saw them start to hatch. They went from larva, and they came out of their little sacs, and they're little tiny sleepy bees. So what do you call a bee that's born this month? A May bee, because it's May. And one more joke for right now. What kind of bee is hard to understand? We talked about how there are so many different kinds of bees. What do you call a bee that's hard to understand? A mumblebee. Ha ha ha. So now I want to show you another kind of honey that I have at my house. This is called cranberry blossom. And it's honey made in Massachusetts by bees. And it's called this because the bees mostly get their nectar and pollen from cranberry flowers. So this honey tastes a little bit different from this honey, which I showed you before, that has cinnamon and vanilla in it. And it tastes different from this honey, which is clover honey. So the bees have been feasting on clover flowers for this honey. The last kind of honey that I have at my house is something that we use in tea. You can get honey in a jar. You can also get it in these little sticks where you cut the end off and then you can squeeze it into your tea or squeeze it right into your mouth for a sweet treat. Or you can get it shaped like these little honey spoons. So if you have a hot cup of tea and you stir this in there, it melts and distributes through the tea and it makes it extra sweet and delicious. I want to go back to the first book that I was reading to you and tell you more about honeybees. So this is this book here that we started reading at the beginning. And we're going to read this section about honeybees. Honeybees are different from most other bees. Why? I hope you can see the picture. It's a little bit sunny today. All bees make honey and spread pollen, but the common honeybee is a very social bee. It is one of the very few kinds of bees that always live in colonies. People have learned how to take honey and beeswax from the colony. Beekeepers have been doing this for about 4,000 years. Some people become beekeepers as a hobby. Some beekeepers sell honey and beeswax to make money. They might also rent their beehives to farmers who need bees to help them grow fruit and vegetables. There are many books and videos about how to keep bees. Here's the beekeeper again. Where are honeybee nests? Many bee colonies are in man-made hives instead of nests. Most of these hives are wooden boxes that are made of sections, one on top of the other. The beekeeper lifts off the section to get the honey and the beeswax. The bees stay in the hive. Nests in the wild are usually in hollow trees. Some honeybees nest in a deep hole in the ground. Some make their nests in the side of a cliff or a bank. What does a honeybee's nest look like? The nest of the common honeybee has many cells. Each cell made of beeswax has 6 sides, a hexagon. Each side is part of another 6 layer that has a lovely design. The layer of cells is back to back with another layer of cells. This double layer of cells is called a honeycomb. There may be 10 or 12 honeycombs in one honeybee nest. There are 3 different sizes of cells in the honeycomb. The smallest cells are for bees that become workers. These are called brood cells. Other small cells near the brood cells are used for storing pollen. Farther away, usually above the brood cells, are still more small cells where the bees store honey. Larger cells, usually built in the lower corners of the honeycomb, are for the eggs that will grow into male bees or drones. There is one kind of cell in the nest that is not a hexagon. It is much bigger and rounded. There are only 5 or 6 of these special cells in a large colony. Each of these contains a bee called a gyne. One gyne will be the next queen of the colony. How are the worker, queen, and drone bees different from each other? Workers and queens are female bees. Drones are male bees. Most of the colony is made up of workers. There's only one queen. Workers, queens, and drones all do different jobs, and a colony needs these 3 kinds of honeybees to survive. How do bees make honey? When bees drink nectar from flowers, part of it gets turned into another kind of sugary liquid. They bring that out of their crop, which is like a stomach, and let some of the liquid evaporate. The sugary juice gets thicker. Now it is honey. Honey bees store this honey in cells. They put a cap of beeswax on the cell from drying up and getting hard. This is a picture that shows you the types of dances that the bees can do to tell the other bees where the food is. A round dance means the food is nearby. A figure 8 dance means the food is not too near but not too far. A tail wagging dance means the food is far away. I think that's amazing. The other way that bees give messages are through chemicals called pheromones that come from their bodies. Other bees smell or touch the pheromones and get the messages. One kind of a message is an alarm. Guard bees at the nest entrance may see robber bees or a wasp or some other creature trying to get in. The guards' bodies produce an alarm pheromone. The other bees smell this and come out to attack and sting the enemy. Bees also leave messages about where there is food or water or a new nest. Isn't that amazing? And the last thing I want to tell you about is what happens when a honeybee nest gets too crowded. When the nest gets too crowded, some bees, a group of them, buzz out of the nest and about half of the colony follows them. They fly around outside in what's called a swarm, and you may have seen this before. Sometimes you see a bee swarm. some of the bees have the job of going out and looking for a new area to start a new colony. And once they do, they go back to the other bees and tell them through their messages, and those bees come along and they make a new colony with a new queen. Bees are really quite amazing. The more you learn about them, the more sophisticated you realize they are. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning about bees. I enjoyed talking to you. Have a nice week. I won't be here for story time next Friday because I'm going to be working at the farm. But I'll be back again on Friday in 2 weeks. And remember, you can watch these shows anytime. They're recorded on our Newton Community Farm YouTube Live 2020 channel. Thanks. Have a great weekend. See you again soon. Bye.